Hello everyone, it's Thomas Marr here from FormulaSpy.com and another busy Sunday evening because we're going to be reviewing the Tuscan Grand Prix, held for the first time at Mugello, which is usually used obviously for MotoGP and not for Formula 1, but we had our Formula 1 race there today, Luke, and a dramatic one it was too. Oh, sorry, before we go, I should probably introduce you. This is Luke Murphy from Formula Spy, and you're very welcome along, Luke.
Thank you very much for having me along.
Apologies, I probably should have led with that, shouldn't I?
It's all right.
Let's get stuck straight in because it was a dramatic race today, and not really for all the right reasons, really. That crash, standard slip today, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, a little bit. Um, the restart was messy. Obviously, this was caused by the initial lap one crash that they required some, more industrious equipment and a lot of marshals to recover. So the safety car come out at the start of the race, and it took them a long time to recover the stuff, with it being a bit more of an old school circuit. But when they eventually got going, what was it, lap 9 or something like that, um, Bottas had probably been keeping an eye on the junior races and seen that the run down to turn one is prime slipstreaming overtaking opportunity. So the restart would have just opened up all sorts of doors for Hamilton to get past, and maybe even other drivers as well. So he did what other drivers had done again in the junior races, which was to back the pack up, slow the field down, and that means that if you're restarting the race at a slower speed, to create as much drag for other cars to follow. So if you're racing at a higher speed, it's a bigger redistribution of air for the cars to follow. So yeah, the slower speeds just mean that it's less opportunity for drivers behind to overtake. So Bottas knew this, and he was well within his rights to slow the field down before the restart. And it was pretty much as he got to the start finish line where he dropped, put his foot down and restarted the race from there. But going on behind, all the pack were bunched up. They were accelerating, decelerating, still warming up the tires, and it seems like just a chain reaction of those driving actions just caused a huge crash behind, and it was some of the onboards were really scary.
Yeah.
It was made you made you grateful for the halo for a start.
Carlos Sainz on board in particular was scary because when he ran into the back of, I think it was Latifi's Williams, you could see that the rear wheel of the Williams kind of came up to roughly where the cockpit area was. And without the halo, like, you dread to think where that wheel might have ended up. It could have ended up him hitting the rear wheel with his helmet. So, yeah, I think thankfully the fuss and the furore that used to go on about the halo, I think, has all but vanished, I think, in the last year or two. The value of it really can't be overstated at this stage. I think at least one driver owes his life, or at least not suffering any injuries to the halo.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, the initial reaction over the halo I thought was blown well out of proportion. It's just something that people get used to. A lot of people just don't like change, and this was one of the effects of it. It, I've always maintained that on issues of driver safety, we don't really get to have a say in it as the general public, because ultimately we're not the ones in the cars. It's those 20 or sometimes 22 drivers who are racing out there. So to a large part, our opinion doesn't really matter,
No,
and we've got used to them. So there's
I
no
don't
problem.
I don't even notice them really anymore. But in terms of like the aesthetic versus the safety reward, I can't believe that back 2 years ago when it was first introduced, that people used to argue that the aesthetic of the car and how good they looked was more important than, something that could have an effect and has had an effect on driver safety ever since. So it's like, in an ideal world, you wouldn't need it. It isn't the best looking thing in the world. But am I as a fan, am I willing to sacrifice that in order to keep the drivers alive and safe and have them going home to their families? Of course I am. And anyone that argues otherwise, I think, is just being very short-sighted and immature and stupid.
I agree. Yeah, yeah. And like we're saying, it's proven to be very worthwhile. And I think, not only from Carlos Sainz's point of view, I think at the onboard of, I think Antonio Giovinazzi as well had quite a lot of things coming at him that may well have been deflected by the halo. So I think there might be two examples of it being very necessary today.
Now, Bottas and Hamilton indicated after the race that they felt a lot of the blame could be put down to the late call to withdraw the safety car, and also having the safety car line so far down the straight, and if they'd had it further back on the straight, that this incident mightn't have occurred. I personally think that that's all very, it's a deflection, I think, because the rules say that the lead driver takes over as the safety car and can dictate the pace, which is exactly what Valtteri did. He didn't deviate in terms of pace. You could see him very deliberately maintaining his pace the whole way down the straight. Yes, he was weaving side to side, but he wasn't hitting the brakes. He wasn't speeding up and slowing down or anything like that. He was maintaining the pace, and the drivers behind him were not trying to anticipate that. But obviously, as you go further back down the field, and I think it was Latifi who said afterwards, you can only see the cars right in front of you. And when you see them trying to make a break for it, he said you're inclined to try going with that as well. But when you watch all the onboards back, you can see that some of the drivers were trying to preempt that and trying to guess when to put the foot down, rather than actually responding to the visual cue in front of them. I think I said on Twitter that you can see that George Russell had left a gap in front of him to Esteban Ocon down that straight, and I think it was shown in one of the angles, and I think I've put a picture of it over here somewhere that you might be able to see. But where I would put the individual, I wouldn't single out a particular driver, but I think quite a few drivers should be slapped with some sort of penalty for today for trying to guess when the restart was, rather than actually responding to what was going on in front of them. And then you've got the likes of Latifi, Magnussen, Sainz, and Giovinazzi, who, I think some of them were relatively innocent in the crash because they were responding to what was going on in front of them, and in the end just piled into those who had been caught out trying to guess.
Yes, so I think there's a list of 12 drivers, I think it is, that have been like officially warned by the stewards after all of that. They had an investigation after it, and
There is 12. Do you want the 12 names?
I'm sure you've got them to hand.
Kevin Magnussen, Daniel Kvyat, Nicholas Latifi, Alex Albon, Lance Stroll, Daniel Ricciardo, Sergio Perez, Lando Norris, George Russell, Esteban Ocon, Antonio Giovinazzi, and Carlos Sainz. More than half the field received a warning for their part in that crash. Now, does that go to show that there was a fundamental issue with the restart, that over half the field drove didn't drive accordingly under the rules?
I think, well, given that some of those names, at the restart were quite far up the order, I think that probably goes to show what the knock-on effect of the acceleration and deceleration of the cars can be. Excessively accelerating and decelerating.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned it was Perez, Ricciardo, Albon, and they were, what were they at the time? Sort of fifth, sixth, seventh. So that's how high up this whole thing started. Yeah. So I think I think maybe a warning is okay, because it's the first incident we've seen of this, and we don't tend to get very many circuits where this is kind of necessary. I'm thinking off the top of my head, maybe Baku is somewhere where you might benefit from slowing the field down right up until the safety car, the start finish line.
Yeah,
So I think because we haven't really seen anything like this before, I think maybe just you know pretty much a reminder to the entire field that you can't you can't do this behavior. This was quite a bad incident. So a warning once and then start dishing out these penalty points, grid drops for next race. If someone else tries it again at the next race, I think it's a sort of sort of an entire field kind of warning, pretty much, because not very many drivers weren't affected by it.
I had a few arguments on Twitter today, which where people were laying the blame on Valtteri Bottas's lap for backing the field up so much. I personally thought Bottas did nothing wrong. He to the letter of the rules did exactly as he was supposed to do. So do you think there's any criticism that can be levelled at Valtteri?
Personally, no, none. I mean, you only have to look at the Formula Two and Formula Three races. I think it happened in both series, in Formula Two and Formula Three, where they did exactly the same thing. They slowed it right down in order to negate the slipstream effect at the restart,
Yeah,
and it worked. It worked for those. So you'd like to think it could still work for what are in theory more accomplished drivers. So no, I think it's part of it is just circumstance and just bad luck. But no, I don't blame Bottas at all for it. I think he did the right thing for his race.
yeah, I agree. But that, of course, wasn't the first incident in the race. On lap one, there was another incident where Pierre Gasly, what a come down to earth it was for Pierre this weekend after the highs of last weekend. Knocked out in Q1 and then knocked out of the race on lap one. Um, didn't look like he did a whole lot wrong. It's just literally a case of 3 into 1 doesn't really go sometimes. When you watch on board at Raikkonen on the outside of turn one, he had a little bit of a twitch that kind of put him just into contact with Gasly, who then, of course, was sandwiched in between himself and Verstappen. And Verstappen, of course, had the slow start due to his power unit issue, which he said was going to put him out of the race anyway. And Grosjean was involved in there as well. So a very messy first lap, but I don't think there's anyone that can really be singled out for that one either.
Not really. I think it's part of the nature of the circuit, and I think the circuit invites problems, invites you know uh, unique challenges, and I think as a feature of having such a wide sweeping multi-line first corner, you can get drivers pretty much taking any line they want, and all of which are viable routes around turn one, and then because no driver is really disadvantaged from being anywhere at turn one, it it creates sort of like a pinch point into turn two. So when you've got drivers who are still kind of side by side and sort of coming together, it's it just starts getting you start running out of room. And as we saw, it was Raikkonen on the inside, Gasly getting collected in the middle, and Grosjean was a bit of a passenger on the outside as well. Um, it was just the Mugello circuit inviting some midfield chaos, and I think we saw a similar incident in I think it was Formula Two as well, where this kind of pinch point effect happened as well, and it was just I think just
Oh yeah,
unfortunate racing incident.
in the feature race when Schumacher was very lucky not to be taken out by Jack Aitken on Saturday. There was that similar on the exit of turn one, where I think three cars met, and Schumacher was very lucky to escape that one. Um,
Yeah,
but a successful weekend then for Mugello for a first time. Do you think it deserves a spot going forward?
I think it'd be great if it was to stay on the calendar, but let's be honest, it's going to be very difficult for it to shoehorn its way as a permanent fixture onto the F1 calendar because, there's got to be out of the, what would the calendar be normally? 21, 22 races?
Yeah.
And you'd expect for next season, most of those will have at least longish term contracts. So, you'd get into all sorts of kind of legal wrangles if you're trying to drop off uh, another race for Mugello because it's, sort of become more of a flavour of the month. But I think it will probably open up Formula One's eyes to maybe going back to old school circuits and not necessarily chasing, you know, brand shiny new circuits. So yeah, I don't think Mugello will be able to find its way back onto the not back won't be able to find its way as a permanent place onto the calendar. But maybe that's not so bad. Maybe it's one to look back on with fond memories. It's almost like don't go on the same holiday twice because it won't be the exactly the same holiday next time around, will it? It's you kind of get left with fond memories of it, and yeah, maybe that'll just earn it a place in sort of Formula One folklore. Maybe that'll be enough for the Mugello circuit.
I would like to see the circuit neutered anyway, and that's pretty much what's guaranteed to happen over time. And if that was to happen, then of course we'd have the MotoGP crowd coming after us with pitchforks and axes and all kinds of things. So I think it's best that F1 just kind of treats this as a one-off, goes that's good, and moves on because like I think in recent years there has been a shift towards F1 becoming more global and kind of ditching, I won't say ditching its European roots, but there's fewer European races now than there used to be. And I think for Italy to host two races, I don't think that's going to happen, first of all. Hosting fees are obviously going to play a part in that and who's going to pay them. And it's not like Monza is a poor venue. It's not like Monza is not a venue that deserves to be dropped. So
Mm.
I think Mugello has had its moment in the sun, and we'll probably have to forget about it at least in the short to medium term anyway. But let's talk about some of the performances that we saw on track today. Lewis Hamilton, peerless as usual. He had pole position. The only mistake he really made was being outdragged by Bottas on the first start. But literally the first sniff he had of getting back past Bottas, he took it, and Valtteri just relinquished the place again. And I tend to be critical of Valtteri, and the thing is, he's such a nice guy, and I don't want to be piling on to him again. But again, you just see that Lewis is willing. He knows that Valtteri is going to give him that space, and he knows Valtteri is going to play fair, and Valtteri is not willing to risk that collision between himself and Lewis and keep everything harmonious at Merck. And today we saw it again. Valtteri just let Lewis through again. It's really not a very good look for Valtteri, is it?
No, I mean it was a very good initial start from Bottas and a good safety car restart. But then it was the second standing start where he uh, got jumped by Hamilton, and it was it it was Lewis Hamilton making up for the initial loss at the start of the race, and Bottas was he was trying to look for a way past, hoping for something to happen where he'll have the opportunity to try and pass Hamilton again. He was hoping for a safety car. He got a brand new standing start instead, which would be the third standing start of the. But he wasn't able to capitalize on the opportunity, and instead went the other way.
Yeah,
He fell
Mercedes,
behind
yeah.
Ricardo, and then once Lewis Hamilton had the opportunity, he didn't look like he was going to lose it. It was very well managed by Hamilton. I think we were kind of getting teased at the end by the gap coming down to 1.5 seconds or something like that, and then it just turns out Lewis Hamilton was just saving some battery power to just smash the fastest lap with a lap or two to go. So, it was very well by Hamilton once he had the start, and very very commendable, and it puts him one win away from equaling Schumacher's
It's
win
his
tally.
90th win today, so 91 is next, and there's no
Yeah,
one that can stop him.
I I don't think so. I mean, the record's going to go this season, and in all probability, he's going to equal Schumacher's number of drivers' championships record of 7. And yeah, and I think he's, this season and next season he is set up very well for him to, um, you know, to break Schumacher's records and maybe go on to an 8th title. I mean, it's obviously early to say, but if things don't change too much between 2020 and 2021, he's likely to have a similar scenario again. So yeah, he's definitely capitalizing on the opportunity, and fair play to him. He's doing a sterling job.
Do you think Lewis was a saint in a past life? In order to have this kind of
He's
fortune where you can be in a car that's a second a lot faster basically than everybody else, and then to have a teammate that's, you know, a little bit weak-willed, a little bit subservient, and a little bit slower.
um, he, he's definitely making hay while the sun shines. Yeah, he must have acquired some good karma from somewhere, or something like that. He's he just seems unstoppable, and yeah, I think we all want to see Bottas get his elbows out a bit more, but it's just not quite happening. And I'm kind of hoping there's going to be some kind of breaking point where he just sort of goes a bit berserk and doesn't take him off or anything like that, but just starts like trying some semi-audacious moves, and
You
you
want
know
Lewis
just
to get pissed off at him. You want to see
yeah,
that breakdown in their friendship, because
yeah,
teammates aren't supposed to be friends if you're fighting for the championship. And it's all
yeah, just
slaps on the back, and it's all, oh, great driving there, guys, and everything. And you just want to see, like, you want to see that ice cold distance that there was, say, between Lewis and Nico, because Lewis knew Nico was going to do everything in his power to take him down and to make life as difficult for him as possible. While Lewis is able to look over at Valtteri and just think to himself, huh, I've got you covered.
I don't know if Bottas is playing some kind of super long game where he might have insider knowledge that Hamilton's thinking of retiring either this year or next year, so maybe he'll become de facto number one for 2022 or some mad long game like that. It would be because yeah, like you say, he just seems very just unwilling to rattle the cage, or poke the angry tiger or whatever. Yeah, it's a shame. It's definitely a shame that not more of that is happening. But you know, it's exactly what Mercedes want right now.
I think if that situation was the case and Valtteri just inherited a number one spot, the driver he'd have to be teamed up with would have to be pretty weak in order for him to still be guaranteed a championship. And considering that it's more than likely going to be George Russell, Russell doesn't strike me as the type that would be willing to play number two, or be willing to even serve a year as an apprentice to Valtteri Bottas. Valtteri has done such damage to his reputation and is viewed as a pushover that if another driver came in and was willing to be like number two to him, I don't think any driver worth their salt would be willing to accept that scenario.
No, neither do I. And if it is Russell, I don't think he'll take any kind of role like that. Definitely
And
not.
assuming it is Russell, because who else is it really going to be?
Yeah, well, the likely target, providing he doesn't completely foul up the rest of his Williams career.
Yeah, I don't think he will either. He was actually one of the unlucky ones today. Well, maybe not unlucky is the right word, but on the soft tires for the last start, he was in P9 and he fell right back to the back down to I was just looking at it here, down to P12, P13, and tried to work his way back up, but wasn't quite able to. So just a little bit unlucky. That last start costing Williams and Russell that point or possible points.
Yeah, I've never known someone be so consistently highly rated and putting good performances, but without having yet scored a point. It's quite remarkable, really. And he did, you know, 95% of the job, and it was just the third restart. I mean, he probably had very perfectly acceptable restarts for the first and second attempts, but it was the third one that dropped him out of the points, and he wasn't able to do anything about the Ferraris. And it's a bit of bad luck that things just didn't fall his way a bit more in a race of chaos. But he's certainly he's not doing his reputation any harm, and I think he's definitely got the measure of Latifi at Williams, and at the moment it doesn't seem like it's going to change. But I think Russell will get a point or two before the season's out. I think Williams is definitely a lot more competitive than it is last season. So
Absolutely, yeah.
I think he'll have opportunity to break his duck and get on the score sheet for the first time.
Speaking of breaking their duck, Alex Albon finally managed to get on the podium. He's looked a lot more competitive this weekend than usual. He was only just off Max Verstappen's pace in Q3 on Saturday. Had an all-round decent race on Sunday. There's not really a whole lot you can say that he did wrong. Fell behind Ricardo and Perez at one point in the race, but he was able to make back up the places and overtook Ricardo. And yeah, it's great to see Alex finally get that off his back, and he was on the radio afterwards saying thanks for sticking with me and everything like that. How much of a relief do you think it'll be for him to have finally gotten that result?
I think it's going to be a huge relief. I mean, it was he, he might have got a little bit nervous at the start of the race because he didn't have the best of starts. I think he initially lost places in all three of his starts. The first one he went from I think fourth down to seventh. The second one I think he maybe did he fall behind one of the racing points again or something like that. And then the third one he fell behind Perez but was able to just pass him back
Yeah, it was a
quite
good
quickly
move around the
by
outside
turn.
into turn 5, I think it was. On the
Yeah, it was
outside,
very
yeah,
handy.
it's a good move, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And then he had to get a move on, get his elbows out, and he put in a accomplished overtake around the outside of Daniel Ricciardo, who himself is known for being a quite a hard, brilliant racer, and yeah, and took third place with um, he made it look quite a straightforward pass, to be honest with you. He just it's around the outside, and that was kind of
Well
it.
done,
You
yeah.
know,
Leonid
no theatrics or
Leonid Karakolov has a. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He has sent in a question just saying, do you think Ricardo lost the place to Albon due to the fact that Ricardo used all of his energy during the restarts 2 laps before he got overtaken? On the restart, he was insanely fast, 4.2 seconds to 200 kilometers an hour compared to Hamilton at 4.7. So to me, it would suggest, yeah, he used quite a bit of energy and then probably didn't have quite enough to defend. That's
I mean, his intention was probably to just keep in third place. He probably knew he wouldn't have had much of a chance against the Mercedes in the long run. I think I don't think anybody would have thought the Renault could consistently outpace a Mercedes a 14 lap sprint. So I think he just probably wanted to give himself a bit of ground on Albon. Um, yeah, he could have maybe used up a bit too much energy, but I think he fell back a bit anyway once the pass from Albon was done. So I think Albon on him. To be honest with you, it didn't really take Albon that long to get to the back of Ricardo, and nor was Ricardo really able to home anything like that, and it didn't look like he was going to come back at the DRS zone or anything like that. So,
The gap was
uh,
2.5 at the end, so that would suggest just literally Albon just had that little bit more pace.
yeah, just a bit more to just to eke out that gap and secure third place. But yeah, I mean, it was a good effort. He'd been looking racy throughout the whole event, really, and a lot of people would have been delighted to have seen him get a podium. And and I swear to God, if one more person mentioned that tattoo for Cyril Abitbol, I think I was gonna, I don't know what I was gonna do, like leave
Yeah,
Twitter altogether,
yeah, it was
something.
driving me insane, all the chat about, oh, Cyril Abitbol's gonna have to get a tattoo. Ha ha ha, Jesus Christ. That got old very fast, so it did, and it's a
Yeah,
meme I think that's going to serve. I'm not a fan of the whole meme culture in Formula One anyway, um, but trying to make a joke out of absolutely everything. Can we not just be happy for Ricardo trying to get a podium without trying to make a joke out of it?
apparently
I've
not.
had my rant. I've had my rant. Right, there's been as such, it was kind of a race of survival after the airy crashes. Sergio Perez finished in fifth for Racing Point. Fairly quiet race, but he stacked up well against Lance Stroll throughout the weekend. Despite Stroll having updates on his car, Stroll put that to good use in the race after starting ahead of Perez. I think Perez had a very solid, if unspectacular, race to fifth. Is there anything you want to bring up about his race?
Um, not really. I mean, he had a couple of good starts where he pipped one or two drivers, but then just fell back a little bit. And I guess we'll never know what the difference between his and Stroll's car would have been. But I think it was commendable that he outqualified Stroll, because I think he only moved back behind because he had a penalty for his misdemeanor with the Alfa Romeo in practice, I
Yeah,
believe.
yeah.
So yeah, I think solid race, and it's one of those races where he's not done himself any harm. For a driver who needs to start looking around for another team. Yeah, solid enough drive.
Racing Point were unlucky to lose Stroll in the closing stages. He looked on for fourth place, and then he had that moment. It looked like he hit some debris just on entry to the fast sweep, and then his something failed. I was reading the Racing Point press release, and they said that they think it was a puncture, but they're not 100% sure. It's the tire had no pressure when he hit the barrier, so they're working on the assumption that it was a puncture. But whether something failed that led to that puncture, they don't know yet. I'm sure we'll find out over the next couple of days what actually happened for Lance. But a very strong drive overall for Stroll, and unfortunately goes unrewarded. But again, he was highlighting the safety aspect of the cars. I'm very grateful. It was a big crash.
Mm. Yeah, definitely, and yeah, he was very grateful for the safety levels of the cars. But it was shaping up to be a good old scrap between Ricardo, who was in third at the time, Stroll, who was in fourth, and then Albon with fresher tyres in fifth. So I would have been interested to see how that would have shaped up in the final stages of the race. We didn't get to see that as a three-way scrap for the final podium position. But otherwise, it was a good drive from Stroll, and he looked a genuine threat for back-to-back podiums. And at the very least, it'll give him confidence going forward, and it's probably reaping the rewards that people were expecting Racing Point to be getting at the start of the year with the car that they have. So, yeah, hopefully they'll have a lot of positives to take away, definitely.
Before I move on to the next little gaggle of cars I want to bring up, Did you know that Lance isn't a very common name nowadays?
I mean, I might have guessed.
But,
I don't know
but,
a Lance.
but back in medieval times, they used to be called Lancelot. Anyway,
Okay.
Daniel
Uh,
Kvyat finished seventh for AlphaTauri, and again he was another driver to have a quietly solid race. I personally thought he was one of the drivers who was more responsible for causing that crash on lap 7, lap 8. I thought he was one of the ones that backed off a little bit too much, and he was singled out before the stewards. What did you think?
I actually don't remember seeing Kvyat's impact on the restarts, to be honest. But regarding his race, yeah, it was a solid effort and one that was probably needed from him after his teammate stole all the headlines last weekend. He needs to start proving himself to AlphaTauri that he can still do a good job there, and this will do him no harm at all. I think he was one of the drivers who was highlighted as having a, quite a bit of experience at Mugello. That AlphaTauri were probably leaning on a little bit. So he's put that to good use, definitely. And
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, with regards to the restart, I actually didn't see what Kvyat was doing for that. So uh, yeah, unfortunately, I'm none the wiser about that one.
Um, Kimi Raikkonen finished 8th on track for Alfa Romeo, and I know his race engineer said afterwards that he put in an absolute warrior of a drive. And when you look at all the incidents and all the things Kimi was involved in today, it was a warrior drive. And obviously, he had that 5-second time penalty for diving into the pit lane and crossing the white line slightly too late. And as a result, he finished behind Charles Leclerc. But at one point, it looked like that 5-second time penalty was actually going to take him outside of the points. But his pace was quite good. After the final restart, and he was able to pull out that gap and only lose the one position. But apparently, from all the information Alpha have released since the race ended, his car was battered to bits, and they had to knock chunks out of the car on the other side in order to balance the aerodynamics, so that he was actually able to drive the car in a somewhat predictable manner. So I think it was a great drive from Raikkonen on his 20th anniversary of first driving in Formula One at this circuit.
Oh yeah, I mean, considering he was involved in that tangle on lap one, and and still apparently had all the wheels pointing the right way. Yeah, great drive, and it's good that there's a bit of, at this old school Mugello track, there's a bit of old school race car preparation of just hammering things into shape and yeah, and sort of budging things through. So yeah, that's a good little result for Raikkonen, and I think that'll be his first point score of the season. And
First points of the year, yeah, and
yeah,
I think it was a fitting race as well because of course he was fighting with the Ferrari drivers for the last of those points positions, so he was able to stay ahead of Sebastian Vettel. But what does it say about Ferrari that they are battling without? I know there was some luck involved in Kimi getting back into position due to the safety car and the red flags and all that. But if he hadn't been involved in that lap 1 clash, Raikkonen was going to be a genuine challenger with both of the Ferrari drivers anyway. So, what does it say about Ferrari's performance that they're battling so hard with their customer team? It's obviously not the power unit as a differentiator. So, on pure chassis, the customer team and the works team are together on track.
yeah, it says that Ferrari are genuinely, well, battling for being the sixth or seventh fastest car in Formula One right now.
Charles Leclerc,
That's
Charles Leclerc was very, very unlucky. He had a brilliant qualifying session, and then he had that brilliant start. But just as the race unfolded, you could see just they did not have the pace to compete, and he just fell back, and then the extra pit stops. Ferrari are in a bad place right now, despite their celebrations this weekend.
They are, but what else can you say about Ferrari? Ferrari really is they'll probably be just happy that they got two cars in the points, albeit in a race of 12 cars. But what else can you say? It's going to be a couple of seasons of um, damage limitation, really, and next season will be about integrating Carlos Sainz into the team, so they can focus on that and seeing how he matches up with Charles and you know look to the future. Basically, it's all the celebrations will be a nice little distraction for Ferrari's 1000th race, and that's it. Nice distraction, but back to reality from now on.
Yeah, just looking outside the points, George Russell was 11th after losing that position right towards the end. Roman Grosjean was the last classified runner. He was very surprised to still be in the race after the first lap. He said that he actually had switched off the engine and he'd stopped the car at the side of the track. But when he saw that he had two wheels still on the pavement and two wheels on the gravel, he was able to fire back up the engine and get going again. And then there was the red flag, and yeah, they said that he was losing 2 seconds a lap in aerodynamic performance. So it's not really that surprising that he finished right at the very back. But a persevering drive from Grosjean to 12th place, really, wasn't
Yeah, I think it looked like it was going to be one of those races where if you just finish, then you've got half a chance of scoring a point. So, has to be the right thing in just in trying to kind of keep things going, trying to persevere and see the checkered flag. But ultimately fell short. But fair play to them for having a go anyway.
Exactly, yeah. So the others were all retirements: Stroll, Ocon, Latifi, Magnussen, Giovinazzi, Sainz, Verstappen, and Gasly, and they all had their incidents and accidents. But I, for one, am very glad that there's now a break of 2 weeks before the next race in Sochi. Yes, can't wait. Russian Grand Prix, always a stormer. But you've got to feel for all the mechanics and all the staff who are actually travelling with Formula One this year. It's a tough schedule with all these triple headers.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it's the pandemic is just. Uh, y- at first, they'd have probably initially been very glad to be back racing, but now when they're kind of in, the the middle of the season, and are probably thinking, God, when is this season going to end? Yeah, you've got some sympathy for them, definitely, but hopefully they can just be encouraged by the fact that they've only got it's only really a couple of months more of this, and it, and it's a season unlike any other. So, hopefully they can just be encouraged by that, and you know, and that they'll be hopefully getting back to some kind of normality next season.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very much looking forward to the couple of days off anyway. But we should reconvene again in a few days to talk about the developments from this race. There's a couple of other news stories after breaking over the weekend that are worth addressing. But I think we'll leave it at that for today, Luke. Thanks very much for joining me again, and we should talk to you again very soon.
No worries. Cheers.